Welcome, everybody, for another episode of our podcast, our radio show. I'm excited about today's guest. Dr. Marni is she's everything, really. When I look at her bio, I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I'm excited about having you on today. We're going to be talking about domestic violence and the effects of it, and how you get in it, how you get out of it, what happens when you get out of it. So we're going to just be talking about a range of stuff. I'm excited about today's show. So Dr. Marni, if you don't mind, just tell the people who you are and we're going to roll with it.
Well, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. Yes, I'm an author of a number of books. But prior to my writing career, I was a high school special education teacher for 35 years in the Chicago suburbs, with 12 of those years as a university graduate school adjunct professor. My biggest job in the world, though, was that of being mother to two beautiful children. But I decided to make a big change in my life. I was pretty close to retirement. But I decided to leave my 27-year marriage. And there were red flags along the way that, really should have prompted me to leave a lot earlier. But, just like so many other women, we get very busy with our families, our careers, our life, and we just, because we're good people and we are honest and we have integrity, we kind of like to think the people that we surround ourselves with have those same values. But, it was pretty clear to me, there was a defining moment when I knew I needed to escape that marriage. And, what I didn't really count on was that the abuse that, you think you're enduring, but you kind of just don't really realize it to its full extent, really ramps up after you leave. And so, when you make the decision to divorce or leave, or if you are discarded, but it doesn't end there. There's so much healing to be done. But then there's, when you're dealing with malevolent people, people that are undiagnosed, but certainly have a lot of narcissism, as far as their traits, and I'm not here to diagnose anyone, but they're malevolent. They are obsessive. They're like a predator. Something really changes where they may have always been this way, but you didn't really notice. And it really ramps up when you leave. So I actually had to have a garage sale. I lost everything, my home, my money. I even lost those two beautiful adult children to parental alienation. So they have not been in my life for years.
Okay. And walk us into that, because some people don't understand what that is. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's an unbelievably terrible family dynamic, and it happens to both men and women. But in my experience, it seems to be happening to women a lot more. It's when you divorce or separate with your partner, whether you're married or not, and they want to destroy you. They want to keep up this false narrative to this public persona that they work so hard to, put out there in the world, which is very false. They really act very differently behind closed doors than they do out in these, high-ranking positions that many of them have. They want to take everything from you. And when they realize they can't break you, with material possessions that are gone, they take what means most to you, and it's your children. And so what they do is they get the children to align with them as if it's some sort of competition. People like me, a normal range loving parent, even if we've been abused, we still believe our children deserve and should have the love of both parents and that side of the family. But that's not the case with parental alienation. They make up a false narrative with either outright lies that are just like crazy, like totally would not be anything remotely close to the truth, or they'll make up half truths. But whatever it is, they do a smear campaign, not only with the children, but with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your neighbors, So that when you finally, escape, it turns out that you have lost all your support system. And, at the same time, you've lost your children, which is just devastating. Now, in my case, my children were adults, 20 and 23 at the time. They are currently 27 and 30. And, but this happens to very young children. It happens to babies, where the one partner will do whatever they can, false arrests, false allegations, outlandish things. They'll do whatever they can to destroy you. And it's parental alienation is really child abuse. But researchers that actually study parental alienation, top researchers that publish in top scientific journals, have come to the conclusion that it is extreme intimate partner violence, because it really is directed towards the ex-spouse, ex-partner. The kids are just caught in the crossfire of this. And unfortunately, as time goes on, these kids believe this false narrative. They know that parent's love, the one that's no longer in their life, is unconditional, that, where the other one is conditional, and they're afraid, they're out of fear, they stay aligned with that abuser. And then there's something called Stockholm syndrome, which is all from that term was taken from a bank robbery in Sweden, where the bank tellers actually aligned with the perpetrators, the ones, that actually had their lives in danger, but they kind of took on their plight and refused to testify against them and stuff like that. And that's what happens to these kids. There's a Stockholm syndrome, and then eventually what's termed as independent thinker phenomenon, where they believe it's their idea. No, I want nothing to do with my mom because, she tried to murder me, or something outlandish that they are believing. And they get a lot of other people to align with them. So that is parental alienation. It is devastating. It is shocking when it happens. You go for a week without hearing from your kids, or they're not responding to your texts or phone calls. Then it's a month. Gifts are returned, letters are returned, you're blocked on all social media. The abuser will actually, many of them will move the children out of state. So you have no clue where they are. That actually happened to me. First, the abuser moved my one child just across town to another town, where I had no idea where they were. And then they make sure that they align with even the police authorities and with a false narrative, so that they set up the stage. If you were to contact them or reach out, you could be arrested, or you could have an order of protection against you. It's amazing the lengths that they will go to destroy you. And that's what parental alienation is. And I know that that there are people listening right now that have either experienced it firsthand or know someone that has.
Yeah. And I'm sure. I'm sure. And I kind of sort of have experienced a little bit of that, but luckily I was able to intervene before it could get as far as the person wanted it to get. I want you to tell us, how did you meet your ex? How did you get into the relationship? And then when did you notice the abuse? How soon did it start?
Okay, very good question. I don't think I've had anyone ask me that. So I met my abuser in a graduate school class. So we were both in similar fields. I was a teacher and really loved learning and was pursuing my education. And so we met at a graduate school class. But something significant is that I had just come out of a relationship where I was supposed to be married. And the person I had planned a life with and lived with in Chicago for a number of years, who I had met in my undergrad, a week before my wedding, called off the wedding and said that he was actually in love with a friend of mine. And they have since gone on to get married and have a number of children. And, you know, that was just devastating for me. It was shocking that that could happen to me, especially a week before my wedding.
Right.
And so I was in a state of shock and trauma. So it wasn't soon after that I said, listen, I've got to do something. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, go for my master's degree and just get my mind on other things, which I did. So really, when my abuser met me, I was at a real vulnerable state, you know, and then he comes along kind of like Prince Charming, like, you know, a knight in shining armor that was so empathetic to my situation and really, really, you know, gave me the impression he cared about me and all of that. And, you know, there were red flags though, like even before we even got serious, there were red flags that he was juggling a lot of other relationships, you know, that I was just one of many, you know, in this harem closet of women. But, you know, I went along and, you know, but as time went on, I was really love bombed. And that is an expression that is used where, you know, you're put on a pedestal and you kind of think that, you know, your values align with that person's. They seem to like everything you like. You know, as it turns out, you learn later that they didn't really like those same things. They're just saying that to kind of rope you in. So as you know, and then there was even a time when we were getting very, very serious. And somehow I found out that his old girlfriend was living with him.
Oh my.
Even though we were dating and very, very serious at the time. That should have been enough for me to walk away and never look back.
So explain to me that moment, because a lot of women that I counsel, a lot of women will tell me the red flags. And I'm like, well, why in your mind did you see green? It's a red flag, but it seems as though you saw green. What was it that made you just go past, run over this flag and continue on in the relationship? I think if people really could hear what happens in the verbiage and and sometimes what really goes on internally with other women, they won't feel so alienated and so
Right.
shame or guilt ridden, that they can actually start coming out and saying, oh wow, it wasn't just me.
Right, right. Because a lot does happen in our thinking process. Well, in that particular moment, when I found out his girlfriend was living with him while we were dating, I immediately broke it off. And I just said, you know, this isn't right. This is actually very, very wrong. And you go your way, I'll go my way, you know, goodbye. And so I had my first gut instinct was to pay attention to the glaring red flag, the flashing red flag. But then there was a time that many months later, I was hoovered. And so I was hoovered before I was married, where he came back and, oh, he looked terrible. He looked very sickly and just said, I love you more than anything. And it was a mistake that I did that. And, you know, she is no longer in my life and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I fell for it. So how could I fall for it after really being betrayed, even when we weren't engaged? Well, I think some of it is I was young. Okay, so I'm gonna, you know, I'm 60 now, so I have a little bit more wisdom, you know, under my belt. But I was also, even though I had, you know, been dating during that time, you know, actually I met a really nice guy that it seemed we were hitting it off really well. But even that guy said to me, I think you're in love with your old boyfriend and I still would like to date you, but I want you just to go check that out to see if, you really are meant to be with him. And if so, that's fine. If not, I'd like to continue dating. So real
Yeah,
nice guy.
yeah, I
Real
want to
nice.
stop you right there again because this is good because I think you used the term love bomb. And so a lot of times what people don't understand is that you can be in love with the individual because what you're describing is like you said someone with a very narcissistic behavior. And so
Oh,
the
yeah.
first how they hook you is the love bombing, right? And so even moving from that stage to the next stage, what you're in love with is the love bomber or the love
Yes.
bombing. It's not the individual that you see before you now. Because
It is the idea. It is the
mhm,
idea of, a person that really loves you and wants to spend time with you and
mhm,
you want to have a long-term relationship with. It's really not the person, because actually there were many things about this person who I ended up marrying and stayed married to for 27 years that I did not like. I mean, there were things about him that just made me go, ew, yuck.
yeah,
That's not, we're really, he might not be the person for me, but I overlooked that. So I
mhm,
think age has something to do with it. I think our inner desire to meet our soulmate
mhm,
has part of what's happened. Timing, I think, has to do with a lot of things. I think
yeah,
some of it is just by chance and the timing of it all.
mhm,
Although they are very calculating manipulators, so they time things very well. They don't mind being patient if it means that they will rope you in and snag you and you know do whatever, just in my case, it was not only give him this family and give him this persona that he was such an upstanding community individual, but it was eventually to get all my assets. Actually, it wasn't even eventually. Throughout the whole marriage, I was gaslit so much to let him control all the finances. I didn't know what forgery was. I didn't know what manipulating money was. And he was a money manipulator constantly. Money was, such a high priority for him, where it isn't for me. So, um, I actually kind of believed almost throughout our whole marriage that we didn't have any money. But I should have really paid attention to, like, I brought home a good teaching salary. His salary was double than mine. I did extra odd jobs with tutoring and teaching graduate school, handing over every paycheck. Um, I don't even remember once bringing my children to a shopping mall because I didn't think we had money that way. I remember I would go to Goodwill or I would go to garage sales, and I would still make sure our kids, had wonderful clothes and wonderful toys and stuff like that. But you know, um, I was always thinking we were on such a budget, when really our money was not being used, for our immediate family. It was
mhm,
being used elsewhere.
mhm, yeah, yeah. And that's when you get to a place where you realize what has happened to you, it's almost like you're knocked in the head and you're dazed. It's
Yeah.
like you can it's almost like I can describe it like someone with a concussion, a very bad concussion, and you walk in and it's just like I don't know. It's like you're in another world because it's like how.
And it's almost like I wonder if our hearts and minds try to protect us from the trauma that we've really endured,
Yeah.
because it seems like after you kind of work through all of that and then you evaluate some other relationships in your life, and then you go back to your own intergenerational family trauma, your family of origin dynamics, we suppress a lot of the bad things that happen to us and just keep plugging along. And eventually the truth comes out. Eventually, that's why you hear of people that realize that they've been sexually abused or, whatever, many, many years, decades even after the event, because it's almost like a protective shield that our bodies and minds, or maybe God does this so that we do not have to face reality, because the reality would be so painful. It might be hard to get up in the morning.
Yeah, a lot. Some people they do that, and it's a technical term for it, but they actually block it or lock it away
Yeah,
in one of
yeah,
their memory chambers, and they whatever they do, they will not allow anyone to unlock it,
yeah,
because you never. And sometimes it's good for them to. For some people, it's good because if you unlock it, it can create a whole nother monster.
sure. And I
But
suppose that I locked things away. I just pushed them aside and just kept moving forward, because, I've always been, ever since I was a little girl, with adversity and kind of abusive situations or, challenging times, I would just pick myself up and brush myself off and go on to the next, thing, where I think that, in time I buried a lot of issues that kind of led me to, you know, jumping in full force with a person that turns out to, still want to destroy me. I mean, I filed for divorce in 2013. The divorce was final in 2015. It's now 2022, and my abuser is still taking me to court. And
really,
so even though I moved thousands of miles away to the Caribbean from the Chicago suburbs, he wrongly wants, it's money motivated. He, even though, gosh, he makes triple, quadruple what I make. It's not about that. It's almost not about the money. It's about the control and the power and wanting to keep you engaged. So, it's just like they can't, you've moved on, I've moved on. I found love, I found peace, I found happiness. I have a wonderful career as an author. But they want to keep bringing you down for whatever reason. They're very sick individuals. They spend a great deal of time with their calculating plans and schemes, and it doesn't matter if they've moved on. They're still not the honorable people that they might portray now, because they're still juggling a number of relationships. They always are.
Oh yeah, and the thing with them is that how dare you move on and do well? Now, if you would have moved on and done horrible, it wouldn't have been a problem. But how dare
Right.
you move on and do well, and then you got the nerve to do well without me?
And to just be happy. I'm a happy person. I
Yeah.
still believe in goodness and love. And even though, he has taken the children away from me, which is just mind boggling. I'd like to at least think that I laid a great foundation with them for the 2 decades that they were in my life. You hope that at some point, their light bulbs will go on and they'll seek out the truth and that kind of thing. But, at the same time, I can't control what other people do. And I just want to live my life in peace and happiness. And because of that, not just with that abuser, but I've realized some other people close to me really did not have my back either. And that there were some betrayals that, were pretty shocking with other people that I would not have expected.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think what happens is that when you have people who first of all, we live in a society where women voices are not really heard, whether it is from the abuse from a narcissist, physical, emotional, rape. We hear stories of rape victims being accused of people saying it was your fault. It
Right,
happened
right.
because this was not rape. But then men, is like no matter what happens, they seem to come out on top. Um, it's very hard for people to believe that certain men have proclivities to be monsters because they have portrayed such alternative ego or personality in public. And so how I don't think my pastor could be abusive. he's my pastor,
Mhm.
or I can't believe my doctor would never, not my
Mhm.
doctor, people, men that are in power can't actually be evil. How? No. And it's like something in the minds of people just can't view that. It's always, it seems to be the woman. It's the woman's
Right. And
fault.
so many of these abusers seek out positions, professional positions where
Mhm.
they are the top dog, the leader, the president, the CEO.
Yep.
They make sure that they are kind of untouchable.
Mhm.
And then they make connections, with law enforcement and with the lawyers and with the judges. And
Mhm.
because they are so far, better well off because they've already taken all your money. And, like I said, money manipulation is a big part of it. It's nothing to them to keep engaging in this kind of thing. It's actually fun for them. Some of these people, the whole legal system is kind of like a playground for them. They
Mhm.
really love it. But I will have to say, even though I do agree with you that there are many men that are in these positions that really take advantage of that and are extremely abusive behind closed doors. There are women too that, are out to hurt other people and to hurt men as well. So
Mhm.
like in the literature for parental alienation, they really say that it's not gender specific, that really women can do all sorts of things, accuse the husband of, sexually molesting the kids and causing havoc in their life where things aren't true. But I will say that in my experience, learning about all of this, I've basically only come across women, there's a few men, but, women that, don't stand a chance because of all the connections of these people. And then, something that should be mentioned here is there's the ultimate, destruction that we're reading about in the news all the time. Every week, I seem to read about one spouse killing another spouse.
Mhm.
And sometimes they want to kill the children
Mhm.
because they don't want you to have the children. And they don't really love the children like you do, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like the loving parent does.
Mhm.
They are kind of tools to manipulate. They are weapons in their war against the other spouse.
Mhm.
And so they will think nothing of murder.
Mhm.
And it's happening all the time.
Mhm.
And they'll try to set the stage like, oh, my wife was suicidal or she was mentally ill. I can't even imagine what my ex said to our children, to our neighbors, to my coworkers. I can't even imagine the story that was made up. But the bottom line is I've never been suicidal. I've never been diagnosed with a mental disorder, emotional disorder. I've never been on prescriptions for that. But they will set the tone so that if you somehow meet an unfortunate death, they will have already kind of set the stage that it will look like, oh, she was so unstable,
And
when really that's not the case. They are calculating liars.
right, and what happens, especially in the case where people are gaslighting you, and so what they do is they've been gaslighting you this whole time, and then they know how to get you in a place, open place. They know what's going to trigger you, and they trigger you and make it look like, now see, I told y'all. I
Yeah.
told y'all she was crazy. I told y'all she was losing her mind. I told y'all she was whatever, because they have already set the stage.
Right. And you're reacting like a normal person would to extreme abuse and injustice. Like even in the courtroom situation, it's the loving, empathetic parent that is the one that's in shock. Like, that is not true. This is
Mhm.
a lie. How
Right.
could you believe that? And we have emotion, uh, attached to our response where
Mhm.
they are calm,
Mhm.
cool, and collected. They are secret agent men.
Mhm.
They've got it all under wraps. And so they come across as the more reasonable person when really we're just reacting to such injustice and such
Yeah.
abuse.
Oh yeah, and it does such mental damage to someone and to their psyche. So I want us to talk about, moving fast forwarding, how did you gain the strength to finally say enough was enough and get out?
Well, in my case, there was a defining moment. Okay, so it was just over pizza dinner with my ex-husband and one of our children. And it was just an unintentional confession that he made, and it involved money manipulation with our children's money. And that is just something as simple as that is when my light bulb went on. What was like, the abuse wasn't just happening to me, it's now trickling over to our children, which is mind-boggling because they've aligned with him. And if they really looked at the whole story, and they were there, I mean, they witnessed that, the shock of like, okay, Dad, if you need to do that, okay, if you need to for our family, but I kind of went silent because that was my defining moment. I knew it was almost like I had pushed aside all the red flags for 27 years, and they all were being illuminated by just this one other incident. It was like the timing of it all. And the next day or the day after, I really didn't say too much to my ex-husband. I was just, quiet. But then it got physical. He physically threatened me. He shoved me up against the wall at one point in our bedroom, finger in my face. My head had banged the wall, and said, "Don't you dare divorce me. And if you divorce me, I'll take your house, your money, and your children." And, I was terrified. And the first thing I thought of is, who says something like that? Who says, "Don't you dare divorce me"? As if I'd want to, I never even mentioned divorce. So obviously he knew that his mask had slipped, and he realized that was kind of the final straw for me, even though I'd never said a word about it. But who says, "Don't you dare divorce me"? It was really strange. And then he followed through by taking the house, the money, the children. And, I was terrified at that point, of what he would do. I mean, I don't want to be a statistic, and it wasn't much longer that, he left the house. And then, of course, all the divorce proceedings began. But that's a nightmare in itself. He still has the one lawyer. They're a criminal lawyer. So it's like the criminal people can understand criminals. I'm not a criminal. It's very hard to understand their mindset. I've gone through many, many, many lawyers because it never ends, it seems. They always kind of leave. You're almost abused again in the legal system. And like I said, I'm still back in court, and it's unbelievable that I'm having to defend lies again, and I have to produce documents to counteract his false documents. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what they do. And so that was my defining moment when I knew enough was enough. And I was done, and I was scared. And believe me, there were a few years after that of just survival mode. Luckily, I still had my job. I still had a couple more years teaching high school. I had a little support with a few people, but later to find out that some of those people were not really supporting me, that they were what they call flying monkeys for the abuser, so they were gaining intel and, kind of setting me up for more trauma. But, I just still believe in goodness and love and light. And I kept on believing, if I speak the truth, they can't do anything to me now. And that's what I do. I think our voices matter. We need to speak the truth because we're silenced so much. We're silenced with threats, whether they are verbal or nonverbal. And, that's no way to live. And so I was able to little by little pick up the pieces. And for me, writing turned out to be very, very therapeutic to help me cope with all of this trauma.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I'm always telling my clients to journal. I'm really big on journaling because
Mhm.
sometimes you can't always articulate your emotions or your feelings and to a person, but I can write them down on a piece of
Right.
paper.
Yeah.
Especially when you've been in an abusive situation where someone is telling you to constantly stop their crying,
Yeah. Yeah.
shut up. You're constantly being stuffed into what I call this invisible box,
Mhm.
so that you can't even express how you really feel because Lord forbid you tell somebody they hurt you. you know
Right. Yeah.
you are made to feel bad or it was your fault. Well, you made me do this.
Right. Right.
And so it takes time to heal and to get over something that is so traumatic. And if you've never been traumatized in your life, this going through abuse of this nature will have you feeling as though something is wrong with you. Was something wrong with me
Yeah.
before I even got into this? Because it doesn't. People who had seemingly a normal life growing up are still capable of getting into situations like this,
Sure.
find themselves having a hard time getting out of it because it does take one getting, like you said, to a breaking point, where
Right.
it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore, and you have to start planning your escape. But there is escape and there is help out there,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
these abusers will actually target you.
Mhm,
They pick you
mhm.
because they want someone that's intelligent or someone that, is accomplished or articulate, but they definitely want someone that is forgiving and loving and will, look the other way and just try to see the good in all situations.
Oh,
And, so really my being an overgiver, an extreme empath, a people pleaser, which can be good qualities, they really turned out to be negative qualities for me because I was a big target for someone to take advantage of. But you do need to do the inner work and kind of realize, why don't you have the boundaries, or why didn't you see some of this? And we've got to cut ourselves some slack and say, this is a learning experience and all of that, but we need to do the work so that we don't get ourselves in a situation like this again. It's
mm,
very common for people that have come out of a relationship with a narcissist
mhm.
to get themselves right back into another relationship with a narcissist. It really is a common pattern. Fortunately for me, that did not happen. I, met my life partner, who is a good friend of mine that I met, in a tennis class. We now are living a beautiful life together in the Caribbean. So he is awesome, and he understands. He cares about me and understands, even though he doesn't have children of his own, he really gets it. And I'm very fortunate. I think I'm uh, a rare case to not have to go through the narcissist abuse again and again and again, because it does happen to a lot of people. And, you have to realize, you know, it's easy to be love bombed.
It is. Let me ask you a question, and we're gonna have to before we close out. I want to ask you a question now. When moving on from your situation, do you find it, or did you find where you had trust issues?
Oh,
Was it?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, not only do you have trust issues with other people, you have trust issues with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So sure you do, but at the same time, and actually, the trust issues even got worse when you realize some of your close friends and family were really aligning with the abuser, or just, if they're not doing that, they're certainly not aligning with you or connecting with you. It's not as an authentic relationship as you think. In fact, that's why I named my 5-book series True Deceit False Love, because we want true love, whether it's with a romantic partner, a friendship, a family. We want that true love, but sometimes what we get is true deceit, and the
Yeah.
love is false.
Yes. Now, can you tell the audience where can they get your book from? Your book series.
Okay, yeah, that book series, along with my first spiritual fiction, is at Amazon, and it's Barnes and Noble, and my publisher is Balboa Press, which is a division of Hay House.
Okay.
But my first book is called God Came to My Garage Sale, when I had lost everything, and but did have some spiritual miracles that reassured me I was on the right path. So I'm not on social media, but I do have a website, which is the title of that spiritual fiction. So www.godcametomygarage.com. And that's where you can find out about me, my books, my book signings, different events that I'm going to be in. There's a talk of that book becoming a movie. So I might have some announcements in 2023. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's where you can find me, is on my website.
That is amazing. I'm really blessed to have been able to talk to you. And I know that there are so many listeners that are blessed to hear your story, because there is life after abuse. There is so much life
Yes.
after abuse, and you do not have to lay in what you went through. You are not defined by what you went through. You have so much life ahead of you. So again, thank you for joining us. We have to get back together really soon. And I thank all the audience for joining us. Join us again next week, and we will be talking and exploring how we can continue to heal our souls.
Thank you.